Hi, I'm Peter Ames Carlin, author of the audiobook Bruce, which is read by Bobby Cannavale. Bruce has long sung about and written about his father and his relationship with his father, which is has been one of his recurring subjects for decades. And the way he had always described it was that it was a very kind of one of those generation gap type of relationships where Bruce wanted to live one way and his dad was determined for him to live in a more traditional way, the way that he had lived. So in Bruce's telling, there'd be screaming arguments and fist fights or close to it, and he said his ma had to run in between the two of them to keep them from killing each other. But then the interesting thing was, having then run all that by Adele and Bruce's sister, Ginny, who's only 14 months younger than he is, it was like they had no memories of that whatsoever. Nothing like Bruce described it, because the fact of the matter was that Doug was manic depressive, and his difficulty in life, along with, I think, being, part of the working poor, which leaves you very few options in a lot of ways, was only made, exponentially worse by the fact that he had a serious mental illness, and which runs through the generations of the Springsteen and the Irish side of his family, the Garrity's, for generations. It's just one of those things. That's how depression works. So, or mental illness works, I should say. And so Bruce just had an extremely difficult time, and I think to a great extent, I think intriguingly, still does, separating what he knows intellectually about his dad to what he feels about that relationship. I don't know. Obviously, Doug, back in those days, and with the sort of not good health care that a poor person would receive, he was undiagnosed, and so he treated it, assuaged his pain the only way really he knew, which was to, go into the kitchen at night and drink a lot of, drink a six-pack of beer and smoke cigarettes and, turn out the lights and be by himself. And so Bruce found him just entirely you couldn't reach the man, and Bruce was desperate to reach him, to feel close to him. And when I went to Bruce after I spoke to his mom and sister and said, well, how can we reconcile these two versions of events? And and that was difficult for him to address. And finally he said, it was like the air seemed to crackle around him suddenly, and it was this intense moment. The entire coloring of his face changed, and he looked me in the eye and he said, it wasn't what was done, it was what wasn't done. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, there was just no acknowledgement, there was no connection, there was no sense of any kind of relationship. And he, as a 61-year-old, thoroughly therapized individual, and super intelligent and with a great deal of emotional sophistication as well, it was as if no time had passed, and he was still 17 years old, and he was visibly upset. And though then he's very quick to say, look, I loved my dad, I loved him, he was a great guy. And so he is conscious of the terrible straits that his father lived through, and there is something heroic about it to a degree, but it was just that, I think, that feeling of absence, of disconnection, and what he experienced of it, which was essentially that he was being slighted, that he wasn't good enough for his father. He wasn't the man his father wanted him to be. And I think it's pretty clear that that haunts him to this day.